Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today I've got Kevin Turner with me. Kevin's in a hot Texas and I'm in a very hot London. And we're going to be talking about personal branding, the mistake that everybody makes, which is to make themselves look like everybody else. But before we get into it, I always ask my guests, Kevin, where can people find you?
Absolutely. And Tim, first of all, I appreciate coming on. I love your program and so excited to be here. I'm all about branding, always have been. And to find me, it's fairly easy. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I spend probably 70% of my day on LinkedIn. So I'm there, very active. And my profile is, linkedin.com/in/president.
Now, I've noticed that you got that.
The beauty of that is you think about branding. Anytime somebody actually searches for the president of LinkedIn, guess who's number 2? So it works, right? You've got to think of little bits and pieces like that kind of puts you out ahead of the pack. And that's absolutely a little bit about what we'll talk about.
And I think it's a classic example of actually LinkedIn is a computer. And computers do what you tell them to do, and if you do some things, it works for you.
Absolutely.
So Kevin, while we're patting each other on the back, you're in terms of if people are interested in up to date things in terms of LinkedIn, you're a great person to follow. Partly because you've been on there for a long time and you have connections in LinkedIn, but you are so passionate about it, you are constantly putting stuff out about LinkedIn, and you're a great person to follow and connect with if people aren't already doing that. And I put my hands up. You're welcome.
It's a delicate balance because I have been on LinkedIn since 2005. I've got many friends inside LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is a business. People forget that, right? It's not really a social good site. It is a business. They're there to make $15-16 billion a year. They do it for themselves. That's really why they're there. We get the side benefit, right? Because there are a lot of magic that happen on LinkedIn that we do have the opportunity there. But what is interesting is sometimes I'll write about new features and I'll write about them in the good and the bad, right? How the database processes it. Sometimes my friends, I call them my insiders, right? Sometimes they don't appreciate what I write. And so I have to make amends. But they do have me beta test a lot and get very involved. And I do look at this from a different perspective, not just what does it look like on the outside, but how does it work within the database? And we're now, 850 million LinkedIn profiles, right? Basically, that's for the most part, a resume or a sales brochure. How do you stand out, right? And LinkedIn created a system that is really easy to create a profile, but it doesn't always work with the database. So you think this looks fantastic. I've got it made. I don't have to do anything else, and nothing's coming to me. And it's really because you probably haven't figured out how that data is working within LinkedIn so that you can be found, so you can be ranked higher. And it's much like if you think about Google SEO, right? Every time somebody says, I found the formula for Google SEO, they change it. They're constantly changing. And so staying up with it and I think having a passion and enjoying it, right? And maybe a little bit of that adventure of beating the game. I like to do that. And then I like to share that so other people can do the same. And so to me, that's exciting. It's a geek's world, I guess.
And I think being able to use LinkedIn is the equivalent of being able to use spreadsheets or Excel like was 20 years ago. It was something that I know it's commonplace now, and everyone goes, well, everybody knows how to do it. Well, yes. But LinkedIn is we know our customers are on LinkedIn. We know that they're using digital and social. Therefore, we have to be where our customers are. Therefore, we need to understand how LinkedIn works. And just as much as always in the past in sales, we needed to be better than our competition, we have to be better than our competition on LinkedIn, don't we?
Definitely so. And sometimes it's those small little components that get us there. So, that's one of the reasons I like to share these new pieces because they can get people ahead of the game. But before you can even get to that point where you can start impressing, everybody else on LinkedIn and they're lining up as your customer, you've got to get your branding right. And that is what, we're talking about brand to land, right? Everything you do on LinkedIn, you should look at that as a component to move you forward. Right. And so really that's what kind of brand to land is as a message, is looking at LinkedIn in the sense of, how do I make LinkedIn work for me? How do I get it so that when I'm on LinkedIn or somebody's finding me on LinkedIn, they understand what I do, they understand the value I bring to the table, right? And they trust me. So I build that kind of trust in there. What that does when you get that equation right is you're not then there pushing and selling.
Yeah.
Right. You're there sharing knowledge. You're there supporting others. You're there networking. And naturally, when the time is right, customers are then calling you. And Tim, the best time
there's one calling you now, Kevin.
Yeah, it looks like it. The best time to close a customer is when they're calling you, right?
Yeah.
For your product. And the worst time is when you're trying to convince and cajole and push that customer into buying something they're not ready for. And so, that is the beauty, I think, of LinkedIn, is it is a global network, right? We're no longer restricted to our backyard.
So the first thing I think what I'm hearing you say is that we need to stand out, but we need to get LinkedIn to work for us. So
Absolutely.
in effect, I mean, not LinkedIn the company, but LinkedIn the profile, basically working for us. It's when we reach into the toolbox of what things that we've got from a sales perspective, one of those should be our LinkedIn profile, and that should be helping us do whatever we do within a sales process. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. That to me is kind of your first component, right? The LinkedIn profile, for the most part, is like a sales brochure, right? If it's sitting on a desk and nobody knows where the desk is, nobody picks it up, nobody reads it, right? If it's unattractive when they get there and it doesn't speak and really kind of get people excited to read it, it does nothing, right? It's a sales brochure. And so that is what the profile is. And you've got to build that first before you get into kind of the next steps. And I always look at, when you're out there and you're engaging and you're posting, that's kind of like an ad campaign, right? So you got your sales brochure, you got your ad campaign, and then the next step really is this kind of networking and moving them beyond this kind of digital relationship into the real world. And that's really kind of your lead generation in that process. And again, because it's not just your backyard now, it is a global environment. You have an opportunity to always have, basically opportunity coming to you, right? So, if you do this correctly, and it does start with that profile, and it starts with kind of approaching that profile a little differently. What people have
and what would you recommend people do? Because I look out over LinkedIn and everybody looks the same. It's either a CV or basically it's a I'm the what people write is I'm a tenacious, energetic, results orientated.
5 adjectives and the same ones on everybody else's. Yeah. And to me that is part of what I call personal blanding, right?
Blanding, yes.
Yeah, we try to be everything to everybody else, right? We try to please everybody. It's the old Jack and Jill, of all trades, right? And of course, the end of that phrase is master of none.
Yes.
Nobody hires or buys from a master of none, right? So we got to break that mold and say, what makes us unique? And we got to bring in, and I always say there's a difference. We want to bring in our personality. We don't necessarily have to bring in personal.
Yes.
Right. But you want to bring in your personality. You want them to realize you are an individual. You're real. You might be fun to work with. You might be serious. You might be whatever that is. It's some of that value that you bring forward. So I think the first thing before you really even get into that profile, and most people already have theirs set up, you want to look at that and kind of, first of all, understand what are your goals? Where do you want to be in X amount of time? Right. Then from there, you want to audit your value. What do you bring to the table that's unique? Get rid of all those adjectives, right? Find proof that backs them up I mean, when I say proof, solid proof, right?
Yep.
Numbers, right? Bring those in. And then it's about kind of organizing that in a way that people get excited to read. Okay. Now, the psychology behind reading, we have been trained now not to open up that book like War and Peace, right? And read page by page by page. We don't do that anymore. We skim, we, look at things quickly. We have to have pictures, right? All those components come into play. When we do what most people do, and I always call it kind of the chronological dump, right? Everything I've ever done, I'm going to throw it in there and I don't have to do anything else. And LinkedIn says I've got a perfect profile, right? I'm all star. Doesn't mean that somebody who sees that is going to see what you do for them. They're not going to understand it. They're not going to go back and read all those details because they're not attractive. So, we've really got to position them that way. So it starts to me, even at the image level, the images themselves. When you first open up a profile, that profile picture is really important, right? If it doesn't look like you and you show up to a meeting and they's like, what happened to you, Tim? You look so good on LinkedIn, right? Maybe they don't know and they're just trying to figure it out and they're not trusting you because of that, right? So that image is really important. You want it to be there. You want it to send that message that fits your brand, right? And that's real key. A lot of people are not using their image, or they're using poorly quality images, hands on the shoulder, dog with them. Unless you're a vet, that doesn't really work, right? You want to make it sure it's your professional image moving forward and that it is inviting and attractive. Now, the next step is that big background banner behind there. People leave that default, right? And if a picture, they always say, is worth 1,000 words, right? If you leave that default there, what is it saying about you 24/7, 365, right? It's basically saying Tim accepts the default.
Yes, it says I can't be bothered.
Yeah, exactly. Or I don't know how to play this game, or I don't really care to be packaged to look good, right? And that's a bad image. Now, the images we pick are also really important. I see a lot of great fly fishing adventures in Montana, right? Or climbing the Zugspitz, right? These are great pictures. But when I'm your boss or I'm your best customer and I'm looking for you and I can't find Tim for 7 hours, guess where I think he is?
Fly fishing.
Exactly. Or climbing the Zugspitz, right? So we want to make sure we're using the right image in there. Even another very popular one is downtown imagery. Now, if I'm a recruiter and I'm looking for somebody who could do the job in your location, right? And I have to then look at that background and say, well, Tim will never leave his town. He is town centric. And ultimately, this position is going to end up in New York City. So we're going to lose him. We're going to have to replace him. So you don't become the option. So again, you want to have a background image that supports you, moves you forward. You can find branding colors. Mine is blue and white. Those are my kind of branding colors. You can find those and incorporate those throughout the profile based on that image. And use that image space in a clever way. Put your name in there. If you want to really be contacted, put your contact in there. The beauty of it being in a graphic is it can't be, scraped by bots. You're not going to get junk email. You're not going to get junk phone calls. You're going to get a real person who actually looked at your profile, was impressed, and wants to talk to you, right? Yeah. Don't go digital if you don't have to, right? So use that as kind of the drive.
Great points, Kevin. Great points.
Yeah. When we get into things like your headline, that's follows you wherever you go on LinkedIn, right? So, if it is title at company, if you're not CEO at Coca-Cola, right? Or VP of marketing or CMO at Nike, it probably doesn't impress anybody, right? No. So you really want that to make a statement to, again, get them to remember you when you're not there, to say that's exciting. What is that? Why shouldn't I look at his profile at this point or her profile? And you want it to drive. Now, the other component of that is it's also very SEO rich. So you do have, 120 was the original. Now you've got 240. Use the space you need to get your message across. You don't have to use it all. But if you can, in the sense that it all drives you forward, go for it. Don't ever feel bad about that. But that's critical. Again, those things follow you. Another component within that same, what we call the top card, is what we call your video profile,
Yep.
or your profile video, pardon me. 30 seconds.
This is where someone's turned on the creator edition, isn't it? Where you talk
Yes, you do have to turn on creator mode to get that, but it's basically a 30-second commercial of you, right? And the values you bring forward, and why would you want to do business with me, or why would you want to like me, right? It's that connectivity piece. Because often when recruiters or companies or whatever it is are looking at profiles, they're seeing just that, the profile, right? This takes it to life. So and I've done this for recruiters, I've sourced for them on LinkedIn before. If I look at 100 profiles and a few of them have that, I'm going to spend more time on the ones that have that, because I can get a better gauge for the individual before I reach out. So, make sure you're incorporating that in there. If you can do those components right, that gets people excited, right? The next step in is always going to be either your feature section, your activity section, and your about area, depending on how you're set up. Those could be at a different stage if you've got creator mode on or not. But those are all critical. So, if you want to say that you're a team player, right? Everybody says they're a team player. Tim, you're a team player, right?
I'm a team player. You are.
But instead of saying team player, you can still say it. It's okay. But instead of just saying it, have pictures of you playing with your team, right?
Playing with, yes.
Yeah. Or if you like to take care of people, you like to reward them and cultivate, that team spirit. Show them pictures of you handing them awards on the national stage, right? Those are the kind of things that those images are more powerful than the statement alone, and they're proof. So you want to use kind of that feature section, bring those in. If you've turned creator mode on and you've got a lot to say, you can also use the newsletter option, which is nice, because then you can set up when you want to send that newsletter out. It initially will go out to everybody as a request. Would you like to be on Tim's newsletter? If they all sign up, or half of them sign up, you've got a pretty good audience that you can basically bring in every month, every week, however you want to do that. So it's a nice option in there. And again, you want to sprinkle that with the visuals as well as your branding throughout. As we build into that about section, right, becomes really important in the sense of what I see a lot of, and this goes back to that personal branding. People write a book, right? And so it's a solid block. We don't read that way. We see that immediately. That's too long, didn't read. We pass by it. So you want to use, small paragraphs, 3 to 4 lines. Use some emojis. And I have a tendency to be conservative in my emojis. I don't use smiley faces and all that stuff, but I'll use a nice button, right? To give the eye a break.
Yep.
When you're using bullets, there is something called a flying F pattern. This goes back to the psychology of reading. If you put your bullets in a flying F pattern, which means the top one is the longest, bottom one's the short, and they descend, 90% of the time people will read all the bullets. If you put them in staggered format, 11% of the time they'll read the bullets.
Right.
So you want to always kind of cash into that. How do people want to read? How do they want to see this? And sometimes when we're talking about ourselves, right, we get a little blind. We think, it's all boring anyway, and we just shove it right in there, right? And that about section dies really quick. And we don't want to do that. And the other component of that about section, if you can get them in there and you can get them to read and you get them excited, don't just leave them, right? Give them a call to action. Hey, if you want to talk about this, this, and this, brainstorm best practices, let's get together, let's have a cup of coffee, give me a buzz, connect with me, tell them you read my about section. Some people will even use special words within that about section. John Asperian uses pineapple, right? If you mention pineapple when you send me a connection request, I'll connect with you because I know you read my about section. But there's real ways of kind of using that as a driver. And to me, all those components have to fit together to kind of bring you into that experience section, which that gets a little drier because, believe it or not, you're trying to sell your background experience. Now, you've got to know your audience, right? If I'm looking to land a new job, I might talk about being the most profitable salesperson in the division, right? If I'm trying to sell to the biggest customer, in our area, they're going to say, I don't like that first price quote, right? Because there's a little money in there. So you want to know who that audience is as you're kind of building this out, this kind of branding segment. So it may be a little different depending on why you're on LinkedIn.
And how much should you write about yourself? Because this is your profile.
Yeah. As much
and
as
one of the
people
things
will read.
Okay, because quite often people towards a CV, or it becomes a CV. These are my responsibilities, and it's dull.
It can be. And so one of the things that changes that, in a CV and a resume, it's all about person neutral, right? In LinkedIn, it's about getting to first person, to becoming more personal. So you can change a lot of that content into stories, into examples, maybe take out some of the boring stuff, right? Some of the assumed skill sets. Now, anytime we're building into sections within LinkedIn, and this goes back to that respect the database, right? When we get into areas like titles, if you start typing in a title and you pick Cloud9 Navigator, right? That's my title. That's the company gave it to me. So that's what I'm going to be. I actually did a transition for the head of HR for Yahoo, and that was his title. Nobody could find him on LinkedIn. We changed it to Chief Human Resource Officer. As you type in that little box, it's going to give you drop downs that say this is a market value title. There's 6,500 of them. And this is what recruiters use to find you. But it's also how LinkedIn ranks you. If I can't understand what you do by this obfuscated title, I can't then position you when people are searching for somebody in your area, right? So you always want to watch that. The same thing happens in education.
Yep.
People forget the database and they type in MBA. Well, the university doesn't actually offer an MBA. It offers a Master's of Business Administration.
Yeah.
If you didn't type that and select the drop-down box, you're outside of the filter. And then these people who are looking for somebody who has an MBA, you're invisible.
Yeah.
Right. So you always want to look at that and say, how does that database function? And LinkedIn will give you clues like that, but most people go right past them, right? My idea is better than how the database functions. And so that's what we have to be somewhat careful. You've got to balance that. And if your title is that different, you can always define that in the content of that, position area internally known as the Cloud9 Navigator, right? All truth. I'm really the Chief Human Resource Officer. It all works. So it works with the database. It works how people look to search. The other component of that is LinkedIn, through their AI, which I don't think the I actually stands for intelligence, but through their AI, through these market value titles, they will give assumed skills.
Right.
So if you weren't the greatest writer or you forgot something, they're going to assume it if you're using those market value titles. And there are a couple of places on LinkedIn that you can go to. They're on the GitHub side of LinkedIn that will actually help you figure out what those skill sets are that are assumed to titles.
Right.
So it's all of this kind of fits together. But again, what we want to do is kind of get that message within the profile that is going to sell you forward. And doesn't mean cut and paste from a resume, because again, what most resumes are, they're chronological dumps of what we did, right? We had another position, we had some more stuff. We never go down here and look at that stuff and make sure that the story is told and people understand why you're in front of them. I always look back. I was in venture capital for a long time, and I always got involved with small companies and helping them with their payroll, right? Taxes, payroll. It is a thankless job. If you get it right, nobody says thank you because they worked, you paid them, right? You get it wrong, they show up at your door at 10 o'clock at night and say, can you go back to the office and fix my paycheck? I had it once, I gave them cash instead and said, let's meet on Monday. It worked out. That's something I never, ever want to do again. So guess what doesn't appear in my LinkedIn? That I ever did payroll, right? Because it's not part of my brand that I want to move forward. And that's what people need to realize. These are marketing tools.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good tip, Kevin. Very good tip.
Yeah. Well, and I think people forget that. And we've done things that we don't need to do again. And we don't really want that part of our message. We don't want it part of our SEO mix. And that's why you get people who say, I get recruiters calling me all the time and they want me to buy an oil change franchise.
Right.
And you usually go back into their profile and you go, well, this is why, right? Here it is right down here.
Mm.
You're giving them a signal. Give them the right signal, right? To attract the right people to you. And so that's why you've got to go back and you've got to really look at this, not like a CV, not like a resume, but that presentation of what moves you forward. I think that's key.
I have a friend who was 15 years as a debt collector. And therefore he has that as customer service representative on his LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. And that's probably accepted more by more people, right? There's not a negativity.
He doesn't talk about the debt collection at all. He talks that he was in customer service.
Yeah. And if he doesn't ever want to do debt collection again,
he doesn't.
Yeah, no reason to present it. And that's a tough job. I get it, why it is there. I could never do it because I would feel bad. Even though I shouldn't, but I would. So he's got the same thing. He's at least figured out what he wants to do in the future.
Yes.
Right. And then you want to, again, represent that correctly, but there's ways of doing that at a market value. And that's what he's done.
Kevin, time is up, unfortunately. I could have let you go on for at least another hour, I'm sure. Kevin, it's been so insightful you sharing that. And I look out across LinkedIn and I sigh sometimes with the way that people set themselves up, and they're just not work. The LinkedIn profile it's an online advert for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
For whatever you want to do in life, whether it's get another job, not get another job, whatever. It's there to work really hard, and you've shared some great advice in terms of what people should be doing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope things get a little cooler where you are.
Same here. As soon as you go, I'm putting the fan on actually because.
Well, that's what I've got. I think it looks like I'm in the wind tunnel. We've got to stay cool.
Yeah. So remind people where they can get hold of you, Kevin.
Always on LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com/in/president, and you'll find it.
And if they can't find you on LinkedIn, they're really not looking hard enough.
That's true.
Thanks. Cheers, Kevin. Thank you so much for today.
Take care.